There are many dark and little studied pages in the history of the Third Reich, but a special place among them is occupied by an organization called Ahnenerbe. Its name translates as heritage of the ancestors, but behind this seemingly scientific facade lurked one of the most mysterious and ideologically charged initiatives of Nazi Germany. Ahnenerbe was founded by personal order of Heinrich Himmler, Reichsführer of the SS, who, being obsessed with mysticism, occultism and the search for Aryan superiority, saw the organization as a tool for confirming the myths that underpin Nazi racial theory. The main task of Ahnenerbe was to conduct scientific research aimed at proving that the German nation was a direct descendant of a highly developed ancient civilization that allegedly existed before the cultures known to mankind. These studies were pseudo-scientific in nature, but were taken very seriously at the very top of Hitler's hierarchy. The organization quickly expanded. It included archaeologists, linguists, ethnographers, historians, and even astrologers. Funding came through the SS, and Himmler's support guaranteed the Ahnenerbe access to many archives and museum collections, both in Germany and in the occupied territories. But the main thing was the expeditions. As early as 1935, Ahnenerbe specialists began to travel to the far corners of the planet in search of lost knowledge and mysterious artifacts. Some trips are documented, others are known only from fragmentary reports. Expeditions took place in Iceland, Scandinavia, southern France, the Caucasus and, of course, Tibet, the most mysterious mission, which will be discussed later. Officially, the Ahnenerbe's activities were presented as an effort to deepen the understanding of German history and culture. But in practice, the organization's employees were looking for evidence of the existence of a hypothetical Proto-Aryan civilization, trying to link all significant achievements of antiquity to it. From the construction of megaliths to the formation of languages, they studied Germanic myths, Scandinavian sagas, runic writings, and ancient rituals. In parallel, research was conducted in the field of racial anthropology, the study of skulls, bones, shapes of noses and foreheads, supposedly designed to prove the superiority of the Nordic race. These researches were carried out, including on people in concentration camps, which later became the subject of accusations of war crimes. The Ahnenerbe also took part in the expropriation of museum collections. During the invasion of Poland, France and the USSR, SS units acting on tips from the Institute's employees confiscated relics, books, manuscripts and art objects that could have any connection to the Aryan heritage. Some of these items were lost forever, while others are still kept in closed archives. A special place in the activities of the Ahnenerbe was occupied by attempts to use occult practices in the interests of the Reich. The employees' arsenal included astrological calculations, spiritualistic sessions, and even experiments in scientific influence on the human will. According to some sources, they developed methods of hypnosis, extrasensory perception, and telepathy for use in intelligence and counterintelligence. Modern historians mostly consider this nonsense, but in those years these projects received real budgets and personnel support. By the end of the 1930s, the organization reached the peak of its influence. Its research justified military actions, annexations and seizures of cultural values. Within the Third Reich, the Ahnenerbe was seen as the intellectual vanguard of the SS, creating the mythological basis for Nazism. Many documents about this organization were destroyed at the end of the war. What was preserved is often classified as secrets in the archives of both the Allies and the former Axis countries. However, even open sources are enough to understand that the Ahnenerbe was not just a scientific organization. It was an instrument of ideological warfare, occult search and cultural plunder, a fusion of mysticism and militarism. Some artifacts found by the Ahnenerbe defy clear explanation. In private collections and secret collections, items are found whose origins are still controversial. One of the main mysteries remains the question: what exactly were the Nazis looking for? And what of the found items could have been hidden in bunkers, dungeons, and secret warehouses that have not yet been discovered. The next part will be devoted to one of the most mysterious expeditions of the Ahnenerbe to Tibet. What exactly were the Nazis looking for in the heart of Asia? Were they really trying to get in touch with ancient knowledge, or was it about searching for a supernatural weapon? We will try to figure it out. Perhaps the most famous, and at the same time, the most mysterious expedition organized by the Ahnenerbe was the trip to Tibet in 1938. It was led by the German zoologist and SS officer Ernst Schaefer, a man with extensive experience in Asia and close ties to the leadership of the Third Reich. Formally, the expedition had a scientific goal to study the flora and fauna of Tibet, as well as the anthropological characteristics of the local population, but these goals concealed much more ideologically charged tasks. Heinrich Himmler personally supervised the project and expected the expedition members to prove the existence of an ancient Proto-Aryan race that allegedly came to Europe from Central Asia. Upon arrival in Tibet, the Germans began actively collecting data. They took anthropometric measurements of local residents, photographed skulls, faces, and bone structures. All of this was carefully documented and sent to Berlin for analysis. It was believed that Tibet was the place where physical traces of the most ancient civilization, the ancestral home of the Aryans, could be found. In addition, German scientists collected samples of soil, plants, insects, made films, and wrote detailed reports. However, beyond the scientific component of the expedition, there was a more esoteric goal: the search for mystical knowledge and artifacts. Himmler was convinced of the existence of ancient energy hidden in the Himalayas. Archival documents mention that the expedition was looking for an entrance to Shambhala, a mythical country described in Buddhist and theosophical sources as a center of ancient knowledge and supernatural power. There are unconfirmed reports of Nazi attempts to establish contact with Tibetan lamas who, in their opinion, possessed knowledge of the ancient race of gods that gave birth to the Aryans. A separate topic remains the way the German officers were received in Lhasa. Despite the international isolation of Tibet, the expedition managed to establish contacts with the local authorities. The visit was officially approved, and the participants were allowed to visit the most important monasteries, libraries, and even had audiences with high-ranking monks. Perhaps the Tibetan leaders hoped to use the Germans' sympathy for their culture as a diplomatic lever in the international arena. After the expedition, most of the materials were delivered to Berlin. Among other things, more than 3,000 photographs, dozens of boxes of samples, hundreds of pages of descriptions. What exactly happened to this data after the war is an open question. According to rumors, part of the archive was taken to the USSR, part was destroyed during the bombing of Berlin, and part is still hidden in German and American special archives. Only one thing is known: the reports on the Tibetan expedition were kept in a secret department of the Ahnenerbe, and only the highest SS officers had access to them. But the main thing in this expedition was not the artifacts or even the skulls. The main thing was the ideology. In the eyes of the Nazi leadership, Tibet was not just an exotic region, but a kind of bridge to the Aryan past. Probably, it was here that they were looking for proof of the existence of an ancient, highly developed race possessing secret knowledge. These ideas later formed the basis of occult ideas in the top SS, influenced the aesthetics of Nazi rituals and symbols. After the end of the expedition, Schaefer received high praise, and the materials of his mission began to be used for propaganda purposes. In 1939, he published a report that was met with enthusiasm. However, with the outbreak of World War II, interest in further such trips faded, resources were redistributed to the fronts, and the cult projects gave way to military necessity. But the Tibetan mission did not disappear without a trace. In the post-war years, British and American intelligence were actively interested in the fate of the Schaefer archive. According to some reports, Some of the photographs of Tibetan monasteries and maps of the region were later used in planning operations during the Cold War, and in neo-Nazi circles, the Tibetan expedition is still surrounded by an aura of mystery and mysticism. The question remains open: did the Nazis really believe that the key to superhuman abilities could be found in Tibet? Or was all this just an ideological cover for more prosaic goals, espionage, political games, and cultural influence? Perhaps we will never know the answer, but traces of that expedition still excite the imagination of historians, researchers, and treasure hunters. In the next part, we will travel to Europe, to ancient castles and dungeons, where, according to some sources, the Ahnenerbe performed rituals and stored the relics they found. Were there any artifacts with special properties among them? Or is this just another page at the intersection of myth and reality? After returning from Tibet, the attention of the Ahnenerbe and the SS High Command was focused not only on finding new artifacts, but also on systematizing what had already been obtained. The central theme became the search for safe places to store finds, as well as places where rituals, research and meetings could be held. Thus, a network of medieval castles and fortresses scattered throughout Europe, which the Nazis turned into secret centers for the study of ancient heritage, enters the historical arena. One of these sites was the Wolfsburg Castle in West Germany, which Heinrich Himmler chose as the symbolic and spiritual center of the SS. It was reconstructed with special attention to detail, including the construction of a special hall, the so-called Black Sun, on the floor of which was depicted a mysterious rune surrounded by 12 rays. It was here, according to Himmler's plan, that the ideological basis of the new Aryan Empire was to be built, and it was here that many of the most mysterious relics found around the world were supposedly stored. Officially, the castle was a training center for SS officers, but in reality, strange rituals and meetings took place within its walls, about which no written documents have survived. According to the testimonies of local residents and some surviving SS members, semi-magical ceremonies were held in the castle, which used ancient symbols, texts and, perhaps, even artifacts brought from various expeditions. A number of sources mention objects stored in the underground storage facilities of the castle. Among them are allegedly a fragment of the Spear of Destiny, the same one that, according to legend, pierced Christ, ancient Germanic runestones, golden discs with unknown writings, bones attributed to mythical creatures, and even mystical mirrors used for contact with ancient spirits. There is no official confirmation of this information, but the British and American troops who captured the castle in 1945 noted that part of the dungeons had been completely emptied before their arrival. Who took what from there remains a mystery. Similar centers were created in other parts of Europe. For example, in Austria, Hohensalzburg Castle attracted special attention, where, according to unconfirmed reports, books brought from burnt monasteries and documents related to alchemy and hermeticism were stored. In the Czech Republic, researchers have found traces of Nazi activity in castles in the Sudetenland, where relics confiscated from private collectors were supposedly kept. But it wasn't only the stone walls of castles that were centers of power for the Nazis. There is evidence that some of the particularly energy-saturated objects were moved around the country in special carriages, mobile laboratories. These carriages were allegedly used for occult experiments, research into the influence of artifacts on the human psyche, and experiments with earth energy. What exactly these occult trains hid remains a mystery. Not a single photographic confirmation of their existence has survived to this day, but the Allied archives mention suspicious movements of cargo with mysterious accompanying documents. Of particular interest are the connections between the Ahnenerbe and the secret societies that remained in Europe, such as Thule or Vril. Some researchers claim that it was through these channels that information was exchanged about the location of relics. For example, some documents mention an ancient sword found in Romania and taken to Bavaria, which, according to eyewitnesses, could cut metal effortlessly. Allegedly, it was associated with the ancient tradition of the Geti warriors. After the collapse of the Third Reich, most of these castles were either captured or destroyed. However, as treasure hunters note, in a number of cases, during excavations in the basements of castles, filled-in tunnels, secret rooms, and even empty safes with broken doors were found. All this suggests that in the last months of the war, the SS was actively engaged in the evacuation of the most valuable finds. Many researchers claim that Nazi relic caches may still be hidden in the Alps, underground bases, or even deep under lakes. Individual artifacts surface at private auctions, but proving their origin is almost impossible. Official museums are extremely reluctant to admit the presence of such objects in their collections, and references to rituals in Nazi castles are often attributed to the realm of speculation. Nevertheless, traces of these stories remain in legends, rare photographs, and fragments of archives. And perhaps somewhere in another medieval castle that has become a tourist attraction, a passage to a dungeon is still hidden behind a stone wall, where things are stored that can turn our understanding of history upside down. In the next part, we will move to Argentina, where after the war, items from Europe, presumably belonging to the Ahnenerbe, began to mysteriously appear. Who and how took them overseas, and why do the tracks of some Nazi officers lead there? After the end of World War II, one of the most mysterious stages in the history of the Third Reich began, the escape of high-ranking Nazis from Europe. Numerous testimonies, documents, and investigations confirm that part of the elite of the Nazi regime managed to hide in Latin America, primarily in Argentina. However, few people think that along with them, they could have taken out not only gold and false documents, but also relics collected by the Nazis during their long-term obsession with ancient secrets. Argentina has long been a subject of interest for historians and journalists studying the escapes of former Nazis. In different years, Arto Skorzeny, Joseph Mengele, Erich Priebke, and many others emigrated there or were discovered. But behind the scenes, there was a less discussed topic: the appearance in the country of strange artifacts, documents and objects that were previously considered lost or even mythical. It was these finds that became the basis for the version about the Argentine storage. It is worth starting with the mysterious complex in Patagonia, located deep in the forests of the province of Rio Negro. In 2017, Argentine archaeologists conducting research on the territory of an old estate discovered rooms hidden behind a wall containing metal boxes with stamps with eagles and swastikas. Inside were maps, old documents in German, fragments of ceramics, as well as glass containers with unknown contents. Most of the artifacts were immediately seized by special services and have not yet been presented to the public. According to local residents, strange people often appeared in these places back in the 1950s, speaking to each other in an incomprehensible language, probably German, and using cars with foreign license plates. Some eyewitnesses claim to have seen wooden boxes with metal fittings and brands similar to military ones being taken out into the forest at night. Many of these statements are still considered rumors, but the coincidences are interesting. Another interesting thing: starting in the late 1990s, items that had not previously appeared in any official museum began to appear in Argentina's antique markets. For example, a bronze bust of an ancient German warrior, decorated with runes, was discovered in Buenos Aires, almost identical to the exhibits that disappeared from the museums of East Prussia. Later, in San Carlos de Bariloche, a leather case containing a set of ancient metal plates with symbols identical to those used in the Ahnenerbe emblems was offered at auction. Also in Patagonia, a strange lamp made of white metal, reminiscent of a candelabrum, decorated with runes, and an image of a three-headed creature, was found. The device did not have a standard power source, and its operating principle remained unclear. Some ufologists suggested that it could be a fragment of the so-called Vril technology, the legendary energy source that the Nazis allegedly sought. A separate topic was the investigation conducted in the early 2000s by German journalist Der Spiegel. They discovered that several former Ahnenerbe employees secretly arrived in Argentina in the post-war years. Their tracks are lost in the area of the city of Villa General Belgrano, which is still considered a German enclave. It was there, according to rumors, that a special archive house was built, where not only papers were stored, but also samples of objects brought from different parts of the world. It is curious that the archives of American intelligence, now declassified, contain a document stating that in 1954 the CIA received information about a Nazi initiative to move esoteric objects to South America. The document is fragmentary, but its existence confirms that interest in this topic was at a high level. In recent years, interest in this topic has flared up with renewed vigor when Argentine researchers published photographs of a hidden room in an old house where symbols of the Thule Society and engravings depicting Tibet and Arctic landscapes were found on the walls. Many associate this with expeditions organized by the Ahnenerbe and suggest that the house could have been used as a headquarters for Nazi refugees engaged in preserving the esoteric heritage of the Third Reich. It is also important to note that Bariloche has been the subject of conspiracy theories for decades as the supposed location of Adolf Hitler's residence after his fake death. Although there is no evidence to support this, numerous clues, such as the sudden appearance of Alpine-style villas, unknown individuals with German roots, and opaque funding sources, fuel interest. So, what do we have? Nazi-related items have indeed been found in Argentina, including those related to alleged esoteric programs. There is documentary evidence that high-ranking figures from the Ahnenerbe arrived in South America. The existence of hidden vaults, secret societies, and displaced relics is not just probable, it is practically confirmed, although official authorities try to avoid the topic. The next part of our story will be devoted to the most mystical episode, the legend of the Hall of the Ancestors, built under the Alps, a place where the heads of Nazi occult orders allegedly gathered and fateful decisions were made based on ancient knowledge. Among all the mysteries associated with the mysticism and secrets of Nazi Germany, a special place is occupied by the legend of the so-called Hall of Ancestors, an underground complex, which, according to rumors, was built by order of Himmler in the most inaccessible areas of the Bavarian Alps. This hall, surrounded by an aura of mysticism, is shrouded in secrets that still cause heated debates among historians, ufologists and researchers of secret societies. The first mentions of the Hall of Ancestors appear in declassified British intelligence documents dated 1946. These reports spoke of the interrogation of an SS officer who claimed that before the fall of Berlin, a certain group of the Ahnenerbe High Command was evacuated to Bavaria. Their goal, he said, was to preserve and hide the knowledge bestowed by the ancients. This enigmatic passage sparked a decade-long search for the mysterious complex, which allegedly served as the last refuge of the Nazi occult elite. Legend has it that the Hall of Ancestors was built inside one of the hard-to-reach caves in the Berchtesgaden area, not far from the Eagle's Nest, Hitler's favorite residence. The hall was supposedly architecturally reminiscent of ancient Germanic sanctuaries, surrounded by columns, decorated with runes and symbols of the Thule Society, and illuminated by a mirror system that reflected light from the surface through a complex network of tunnels. According to rumors, in the center of the hall, there was a round stone table on which lay artifacts symbolizing power and connection with the ancestors, an ancient sword, a silver cup, a bone amulet, and an engraved crystal. The keepers of knowledge, the highest ranks of the Ahnenerbe, including, according to some, Karl Maria Willigut, a mystic and advisor to Himmler, would gather around this table. It was believed that it was here that the most important decisions were made concerning not only the strategy of the war, but also the global spiritual changes that the Third Reich was striving for. Rumors about the Hall of Ancestors received a new twist in 1977, when a group of climbers from Austria, lost in caves near Obersalzberg, discovered stone fragments with runic symbols. One of the expedition members later claimed to have stumbled upon a wall with a black sun symbol carved into it, a sign used by the Ahnenerbe in occult rituals. However, their reports were quickly dismissed by officials as fiction. Interestingly, German authorities still close access to several caves in the area, citing landslides and unstable rocks. These restrictions, which have been in place since the end of the war, have given rise to a host of rumors that something truly lurks underground that could change the way we perceive history. Some theories claim that the chamber could contain Ahnenerbe archives, prototypes of experimental weapons, ancient texts, or even technology of the gods allegedly found in Tibet or Antarctica. In 2001, German researcher and engineer Carsten Steinbrück published a book which he claimed to have found a diagram of an underground facility near Königssee. According to him, the facility is a network of tunnels and halls, some of which have collapsed, but the main hall, a round chamber with a domed ceiling, remains. Inside, he allegedly saw mosaics depicting a scene reminiscent of the ancient Germanic legend of Godens and Valhalla. Despite numerous inquiries, the German authorities have neither confirmed nor denied the existence of the object. Modern UFO circles and conspiracy theorists see the Hall of Ancestors not just as a cult place, but as a key to understanding the true goals of the Ahnenerbe. They suggest that the hall served as a portal, not necessarily in a physical sense, but as an energy center through which one could connect with higher beings or awaken ancient knowledge. This sounds like science fiction, but it was precisely such ideas that inspired the Nazi elite during the heyday of the Third Reich. Many independent researchers also believe that the Hall of Ancestors could have been created not so much for storage, but for the preparation of a certain ritual. Perhaps it was never completed due to the imminent defeat of Germany. But what if some of the Nazis still managed to perform this ritual? What if it was there that not only treasures were hidden, but also knowledge that remains beyond the reach of modern humanity? The fact remains, despite decades of searching, the Hall of Ancestors has still not been found, at least officially. And this circumstance rather fuels interest than cools it. It has become an integral part of cultural mythology, a symbol of secret knowledge and the last bastion of the Third Reich, hidden somewhere in the depths of the mountains. This is where our investigation comes to an end. We have traveled from the Ahnenerbe to the South American jungle, from Tibetan expeditions to caves in Bavaria. And although much of what is connected with the relic hunters of the Third Reich may seem fantastic, every mention, every document, every find makes us ask ourselves, how close are we to the truth?